The ultimatum, the massive warship descended through Earth's atmosphere with the weight of absolute certainty. Commander Vex of the Hegemony stood at the helm, his 6 eyes fixed on the blue planet below. In 10,000 years of galactic expansion, no world had refused the Hegemony's generous offer of submission. Earth would be no different. The statistics were clear. This small planet possessed primitive nuclear weapons, basic space travel capability limited to their own moon, and a fractured political structure with over 200 separate governments. Their most advanced computers still relied on silicon chips. They hadn't even discovered quantum entanglement communication. The evaluation would take perhaps 3 hours, the submission ceremony another 2, and by tomorrow, Earth would be the Hegemony's newest tributary world. Commander Vex activated the global broadcast system. His translator would ensure every human understood his words simultaneously, regardless of their primitive language differences. The psychological impact of a voice speaking from the sky in perfect local dialect usually accelerated. Submission by several hours, people of Earth, his voice boomed across every communication device on the planet. I am Commander Vex of the Galactic Hegemony. Your world has been selected for the honor of joining our eternal empire. You have 1 hour to select representatives to negotiate the terms of your submission. Resistance is both futile and unnecessary. The Hegemony offers protection, trade, and a place in the greater galactic community. Your leaders will be enhanced with compliance implants to ensure peaceful integration. This is not a negotiation. This is a notification. The commander settled back to wait. Sometimes worlds tried to hide. Sometimes they begged. Sometimes they even attempted to fight with their primitive weapons. But they always submitted. The Hegemony's technology was simply too advanced, their fleet too vast, their history too overwhelming for any single world to resist. 30 minutes later, a transmission came through from something called the United Nations building in a place called New York. Vex accepted the communication, expecting to see terrified leaders ready to discuss surrender terms. Instead, he found himself looking at a middle-aged human woman with graying hair pulled back in a simple style. She wore no ceremonial robes, no symbols of power, just a plain blue suit. Behind her stood representatives from various Earth nations, but none of them looked afraid. If anything, they looked amused. Commander Vex, the woman said, her voice calm and professional. I'm Secretary General Maria Rodriguez. We've reviewed your offer, and I'm afraid we'll have to decline. Vex's translator must have malfunctioned. No species declined the Hegemony's offer. He ran a diagnostic, but the system showed perfect functionality. You seem to have misunderstood, Vex said slowly, as if speaking to a child. This is not an offer you can decline. The Hegemony controls 8,000 worlds. Our technology surpasses yours by millennia. Submit peacefully, and your species will be preserved and protected. Resist, and you will be conquered anyway with significantly less favorable terms. Rodriguez smiled, and several of the humans behind her actually chuckled. One of them, a younger man with a tablet computer, whispered something that made the others nod. Commander, we understand your position perfectly, Rodriguez replied. We've been monitoring your communications for the past 43 years. We know about the Hegemony, your expansion patterns, your technology levels, and your standard submission protocols. We've had plenty of time to prepare our response. 43 years. That was impossible. Earth shouldn't have been able to detect Hegemony communications for another century at least. Vex checked his files. The humans had only invented radio communication 130 years ago. How could they possibly have detected and decoded quantum-encrypted transmissions? You're bluffing, Vex stated flatly. The Proxima Centauri incident, Rodriguez said calmly. 17 years ago, you annexed that system despite the indigenous population's religious objections. The Betelgeuse trade dispute, where you shut down an entire sector's commerce for 8 months over a single ship's refused inspection. The handling of the Tau Ceti rebellion, where you deleted an entire colony's cultural database as punishment. Should I continue? Vex felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries, uncertainty. These events were classified at the highest levels. Even most Hegemony officers didn't know about them. Yet this primitive human was reciting them like items from a shopping list. How? Was all he managed to say. The younger man with the tablet stepped forward. Hi, Commander. I'm Dr. James Chen, representing Earth's scientific community. Turns out your quantum encryption has a fascinating flaw. It assumes the observer understands quantum mechanics the way you do. But humans have this weird tendency to approach problems sideways. We don't see quantum states as fixed probabilities. We see them as suggestions. Once we stopped trying to decrypt your messages the logical way and started approaching them more creatively, well, your secrets weren't so secret anymore. But more importantly, Rodriguez continued, we've had decades to study your methods. Your empire works on fear and technological superiority. Remove either of those elements and your control collapses. We've seen it happen 3 times in your history, though you've done an impressive job suppressing those records. Vex's secondary hearts began beating faster. They knew about the 3 silences. Those uprisings had been erased from all records, the very mention of them punishable by memory wipe. Here's our counteroffer, Rodriguez said, her tone shifting to something harder. Earth remains independent. We'll consider trade agreements on equal terms. Any attempt at forced submission will be met with resistance. And, Commander, I promise you've never seen resistance quite like what humanity can offer. You have 17 vessels in orbit, Vex said, trying to regain control of the conversation. We have 1 dreadnought that could vaporize your entire planet. This is not a battle you can win. Win. Rodriguez asked, tilting her head. Commander, you're thinking like a conqueror. We're thinking like survivors. Humans have a long history of making life absolutely miserable for occupying forces. We wrote the book on asymmetric warfare, guerrilla tactics, and psychological operations. Your empire depends on quick, clean victories. What happens when a war drags on for years, decades? What happens when every world watching sees that the mighty hegemony can't even conquer 1 small planet? She leaned forward slightly. We've done the math, Commander. It would take you approximately 3 months to physically conquer Earth using standard hegemony protocols. But holding it, controlling 8 billion humans who have nothing to lose and everything to fight for. Your own historical data shows that prolonged resistance movements have a 67% chance of inspiring similar movements in nearby systems. Can you afford that kind of cascade failure? Vex stared at the human woman. In 10,000 years, no one had ever spoken to the hegemony this way. They weren't begging or threatening or posturing. They were simply stating facts, as if declining the galaxy's most powerful empire was a reasonable business decision. You have 1 hour to reconsider, he said, cutting the transmission. But as he turned to his bridge crew, he saw something unsettling in their eyes. The humans' words had been broadcast on open channels. Every ship in the fleet, every world monitoring Earth's response, had heard everything. For the first time in hegemony history, someone had said no, and they had said it with a smile. The impossible defense. The attack came exactly 1 hour later, just as Commander Vex had promised. Hegemony Protocol demanded swift response to defiance, and Earth's refusal could not go unanswered. What Vex hadn't expected was that the humans were counting on it. The first wave consisted of precision strikes against Earth's military installations. Orbital bombardment cannons targeted major bases, command centers, and weapons depots with surgical accuracy. The attacks were designed to cripple Earth's conventional defense capabilities without causing excessive civilian casualties. The hegemony prided itself on civilized conquest. Within minutes, however, something extraordinary began happening. Earth's internet, that primitive network the hegemony had dismissed as chaotic and inefficient, exploded with activity. Millions of humans weren't fleeing in panic. They were coordinating. A teenager in Tokyo named Yuki was the first to notice the pattern in the hegemony's targeting system. She posted her observations on a gaming forum of all places, noting that the orbital cannons had a 2.3-second recalibration delay between targets. Within minutes, her post had been shared 18 million times. Military installations began evacuating in precisely timed intervals, moving their assets during those 2.3-second windows. Commander Vex watched his tactical display with growing bewilderment as his supposed successful strikes hit empty buildings. The humans weren't using military encryption or official channels. They were using social media, gaming platforms, and shopping apps to coordinate their defense. It was chaos, but it was organized chaos. Sir, his tactical officer reported, we're detecting unusual activity in Earth's civilian sectors. Their non-military population appears to be participating in the defense. Within 3 hours, over 1 billion households worldwide were generating localized interference fields using modified microwave ovens, creating a patchwork shield that made precision targeting nearly impossible. The hegemony's advanced sensors couldn't penetrate the chaotic noise generated by billions of kitchen appliances, all operating on slightly different frequencies. Commander, Vex's second-in-command, approached cautiously. "Sir, perhaps we should consider a more aggressive approach. Full planetary bombardment would turn the entire galaxy against us," Vex interrupted. The humans had been clever. By using civilian infrastructure for defense, they'd made it impossible for the hegemony to escalate without committing atrocities. Every world watching was seeing the mighty hegemony military frustrated by kitchen appliances and internet memes. The situation deteriorated further when Earth's hackers discovered something extraordinary. The hegemony's translation software, designed to instantly interpret thousands of languages, had an unexpected weakness. It literally couldn't process sarcasm. Centuries of dealing with straightforward submission had never prepared the software for humanity's complex relationship with irony. Earth's leaders began issuing surrender statements that were obviously sarcastic, but the hegemony systems registered them as genuine. "We completely surrender and welcome our benevolent overlords with their definitely not compensating for something massive ships," one broadcast declared. The translation systems accepted it as a valid surrender, automatically beginning demobilization protocols, only to have to restart when the humans kept fighting. As night fell over Earth's eastern hemisphere, something remarkable was happening. The planet's economy had entirely restructured itself around resistance. Cryptocurrency networks became communication channels. Online gaming servers became tactical planning centers. Food delivery apps coordinated supply lines to hidden military assets. Dating apps were matching people with complementary skills for resistance cells. The hegemony had conquered worlds with advanced technology, ancient wisdom, and powerful weapons. But they had never encountered a species that could turn their entire civilization into a weapon while simultaneously treating the whole thing like a collaborative, online project. A junior officer approached Vex with a disturbing report. "Commander, we're intercepting communications suggesting the humans are actually enjoying this. They're calling it the best multiplayer experience ever, and giving our invasion a rating of 7 out of 10. Needs better boss mechanics." Vex stared at the tactical display showing Earth, now protected by a chaotic shell of electromagnetic interference generated by billions of improvised devices. His precision weapons were useless. His cyber warfare was being countered by teenagers. His psychological operations were being turned into entertainment. "Sir," his communications officer announced, "we're receiving a transmission from Earth." Secretary General Rodriguez appeared on screen again, still in the same blue suit, looking remarkably calm for someone whose planet was under attack. Behind her, the wall displayed what appeared to be a constantly updating social media feed, showing the global resistance effort. "Commander Vex," she said pleasantly, "I believe your hour is up. We're still declining your offer, but we wanted to make a suggestion. Your conquest model assumes that civilization and military force are separate entities. But humans have spent our entire history turning anything and everything into weapons when threatened. Music, art, humor, cooking, gaming, these aren't distractions from war for us. They're tools we use to survive it." She paused, letting her words sink in. "You can keep attacking if you want. We've got plenty more surprises. Did you know that with enough rubber bands and the right frequency, you can create a resonance that disrupts quantum field generators?" "We didn't either until about an hour ago, but one of our middle school science classes just proved it works. They're posting the tutorial online as we speak." Vex looked at his tactical options. He could glass the planet, but that would destroy the hegemony's reputation as civilized conquerors. He could attempt a ground invasion, but putting troops into this chaos would be a nightmare. He could maintain orbital siege, but Earth seemed to be treating the whole thing as an entertaining challenge. For the second time in one day, Commander Vex felt uncertainty. The humans hadn't won, but somehow they hadn't lost either, and everyone in the galaxy was watching. The Turning Point 3, weeks into what Earth had begun. Calling the space inconvenience, the war had evolved into something the galaxy had never seen before. Commander Vex remained in orbit, his mighty dreadnought essentially held hostage by the planet's chaotic defense. Every attempt to break through Earth's improvised shield resulted in new, increasingly creative counters. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. 12-year-old Marcus Williams from Detroit had been playing with a captured hegemony drone that crashed in his backyard. While his parents thought he was doing homework, Marcus was actually streaming his reverse engineering process to millions of viewers online. His young mind, unencumbered by traditional engineering concepts, approached the alien technology like it was just another video game puzzle to solve. "Okay, chat," Marcus said to his audience, using a screwdriver to pry open what he'd identified as the drone's central processor. "So, like, their whole thing is based on assuming energy flows in predictable patterns, right? But what if we just didn't do that?" Within hours, Marcus had not only figured out how to reprogram the drone, but had discovered something remarkable. Hegemony technology operated on the principle of perfect efficiency. Every component, every circuit, every line of code was optimized to work in harmony. It was beautiful, elegant, and had one fatal flaw. It couldn't handle deliberate inefficiency. Humans, as it turned out, were experts at being inefficient on purpose. The discovery spread across Earth's improvised resistance network like wildfire. Engineers started building weapons that worked on principles of controlled chaos rather than precision. Artists created visual patterns that caused feedback loops in hegemony sensors. Musicians composed songs specifically designed to overload the mathematical processing centers of alien computers. But the real turning point came when Earth did something unprecedented in galactic history. They started broadcasting their defense strategies to the entire galaxy, completely unencrypted, for anyone to hear. Secretary General Rodriguez stood before the cameras in what had become daily briefings, broadcast on all frequencies. Behind her, screens showed real-time updates of the ongoing resistance, complete with failure statistics and success rates. "Today marks day 22 of Earth's defense," she announced. "In the spirit of transparency and galactic cooperation, we're sharing all of our tactical data freely. Any world-facing hegemony expansion is welcome to use and adapt our strategies. Consider it our gift to the galaxy, a comprehensive guide to asymmetric defense against technologically superior forces." Commander Vex watched in horror from his bridge. "They're revealing their own tactics? That's military suicide." His strategic advisor disagreed. "Commander, I believe it's more insidious than that. They're showing everyone that the hegemony can be resisted. They're proving we're not invincible." The advisor was right. Across the galaxy, worlds that had submitted to the hegemony were taking notice. The small agricultural world of Pentara, conquered just 3 years prior, began experimenting with Earth's kitchen appliance interference technique. The aquatic species of hydros started using their planet's natural bioluminescence to create optical illusions similar to Earth's graffiti defense. The silicon-based lifeforms of Crystallon discovered they could harmonize their natural resonance to disrupt hegemony communications, inspired by Earth's musical warfare. Even more disturbing for the hegemony was what Earth called meme warfare. Humans had begun creating simple, easily replicable images and videos that somehow conveyed complex resistance tactics without language. These memes spread faster than any encryption could stop them, teaching rebellion through humor and absurdity. One particularly effective meme showed a primitive human tool called a can opener, defeating increasingly elaborate security systems. The message was clear: simple solutions could defeat complex problems. Within days, 17 different worlds had reported security breaches using variations of the can opener principle, finding the one simple tool or method that the hegemony's elaborate systems hadn't accounted for. Dr. James Chen held his own daily briefing for the scientific community. Today he was explaining their latest discovery with barely contained excitement. "So we figured out something fascinating about hegemony shield technology," he said, holding up what appeared to be a children's toy. "Their shields are designed to stop high-energy attacks, plasma, lasers, kinetic bombardment, but they have trouble with low-energy, high-complexity patterns. This is a toy called a kaleidoscope. When you scale up the visual pattern, it creates and projects it at the right frequency. Their shields spend so much processing power trying to analyze the pattern that they essentially lock up." He demonstrated on a captured piece of hegemony armor, the sophisticated defense system completely freezing when exposed to the swirling patterns of colored glass and mirrors. We're calling it the pretty picture problem, Chen continued. The more beautiful and complex something is, the harder their systems work to understand it. And since humans have been creating purposefully confusing art for thousands of years, the implications rippled across the galaxy. The hegemony's entire military doctrine was based on superior technology, overwhelming inferior opponents. But Earth was proving that creativity could be more powerful than computation, that chaos could defeat order, and most importantly, that resistance was possible. On the planet Xerion, a world conquered 50 years ago, underground resistance movements that had been dormant for decades suddenly reactivated. They didn't have Earth's technology or population, but they had learned from Earth's example. They began using their planet's unique crystalline structures to create sonic patterns that interfered with hegemony operations, broadcasting their successes for others to see and adapt. The Hegemony High Command called an emergency session for the first time in 3 centuries. The situation was spiraling beyond Earth. 16 worlds were now in various stages of uprising, all using variations of Earth's chaotic defense strategies. More concerning, worlds that hadn't been conquered yet were preemptively implementing Earth's defensive measures, making future expansion exponentially more difficult. Back on Earth, humanity was adapting to their new reality with characteristic flexibility. Schools had integrated creative resistance into their curricula. Children learned mathematics by calculating orbital trajectories for defensive satellites, studied history through the lens of successful resistance movements, and practiced art by designing confusion patterns for enemy sensors. The elderly had become unexpected heroes of the resistance. Their lifetime of experience with outdated technology made them experts at the kind of improvised engineering that confused hegemony systems. Retirement homes had become think tanks for unconventional warfare, with residents sharing decades of knowledge about making things work with duct tape and determination. Commander Vex received a priority message from the Hegemony High Command. He expected orders for full planetary devastation, consequences be damned. Instead, he found something that chilled him to his core. Commander Vex, the High Chancellor's image, spoke with barely controlled anger. Your failure to contain Earth has resulted in the first galaxy-wide resistance movement in our history. 17 worlds are in active rebellion. 43 more are implementing Earth-inspired defenses. Our expansion has not just stopped. It's reversing. You are ordered to negotiate. The word was poison to everything the hegemony stood for. They dictated terms. They didn't negotiate them. But Earth had changed the game. By freely sharing their resistance tactics, by turning their defense into a teaching moment for the entire galaxy, they had transformed a single planet's resistance into a galactic revolution. Marcus Williams, the 12-year-old who'd started the reverse engineering breakthrough, was back on his stream. He'd gained over 3 billion followers across various worlds, all learning from a child who treated alien technology like it was just another toy to take apart. So today, Marcus announced cheerfully, we're going to learn how to turn a hegemony food synthesizer into a communications array that can breach their quantum encryption. All you need is some aluminum foil, a rubber band, and this cool trick I learned from my grandma's old radio repair manual. As Commander Vex watched the child casually dismantle technology that had taken centuries to perfect, he realized something profound. The humans hadn't just resisted the hegemony. They'd made resistance fun, educational, and worst of all, accessible to everyone. The empire that had conquered, through fear, was now facing something far more dangerous than any weapon. It was facing hope. The new alliance, the negotiations, took place on neutral ground, the abandoned space station orbiting Mars that humans had converted into a makeshift diplomatic center in just 4 days. Secretary General Rodriguez had insisted on the location, noting with barely hidden amusement that it would be good practice for humanity's future space endeavors. Commander Vex arrived with a full diplomatic convoy, his mighty dreadnought flanked by escort vessels. Earth's greeting party consisted of a converted cargo ship, 2 mining vessels with duct-taped hull patches, and something that appeared to be a recreational yacht with weapon systems that looked like they'd been installed by enthusiastic amateurs. Which, as it turned out, they had been. The space station itself was a testament to human ingenuity and chaos. Half-finished sections were held together with industrial adhesive and hope. Conference rooms had been constructed from shipping containers. The life support system was a hodgepodge of Earth technology, salvaged hegemony components, and what appeared to be several dozen houseplants providing supplementary oxygen. "Welcome to Compromise Station," Rodriguez greeted Vex as he boarded. "We named it that because my engineers compromised a lot of safety standards to get it ready in time." The negotiation chamber was perhaps the most surreal thing Vex had encountered yet. One wall displayed a live feed of Earth, showing the ongoing celebrations of what humans were calling Independence Week. Another showed feeds from the 17 worlds now in active rebellion against the hegemony. The third was covered in children's drawings of the conflict, sent in by schools around Earth. The fourth was inexplicably displaying what the translator identified as cat videos. "We find they help with tension," Dr. Chen explained, noticing Vex's confusion. "Something about watching small predators fail at basics. Tasks makes everyone feel better about their own challenges." The negotiations themselves defied every convention the hegemony had established over millennia. Instead of formal diplomatic language, the humans spoke plainly. Instead of complex legal documents, they presented their terms as what they called a PowerPoint presentation, complete with animated transitions and clip art. "Our terms are simple," Rodriguez began, clicking through slides that looked like they'd been made by a committee that couldn't agree on a color scheme. "Earth remains independent, full stop. But we're not interested in isolation. We propose something different, a voluntary alliance based on mutual benefit rather than submission." Vex's diplomatic attaché interjected, "The hegemony does not form alliances. We integrate species into our empire for their own protection and advancement. How's that working out for you?" asked Marcus Williams, who had somehow been included in Earth's diplomatic team despite being 12 years old. The boy was wearing a suit that was clearly too big for him and had a juice box on the table in front of him. "Because from where I'm sitting, your protection looks a lot like control, and your advancement looks a lot like stagnation." The High Chancellor, participating via quantum communication, began to speak, but Marcus continued, pulling up his own presentation on his tablet. "See, here's the thing about your empire," the boy said, his slides featuring Comic Sans font and an excessive amount of sparkle effects. "You've got 8,000 worlds all doing exactly what you tell them. But when everyone thinks the same way, you stop innovating. Earth beats you, because we've got 8 billion people who all think differently. That's 8 billion different approaches to every problem." He clicked to a slide showing a graph that was scientifically accurate, despite being decorated with dinosaur stickers. "Your technological advancement has plateaued for the last 600 years. Earth's has been exponential. In 3 weeks, we've adapted more of your technology than you've innovated in 6 centuries. That's not because we're smarter. It's because we're chaos." The hegemony delegation sat in stunned silence as a 12-year-old essentially delivered a doctoral thesis on the weaknesses of authoritarian systems. Complete with meme references and snack breaks, Rodriguez took over again, her tone becoming more serious. "Here's what we propose: the Galactic Community Alliance. Voluntary membership, shared resources, collaborative defense, and most importantly, preservation of individual planetary cultures and governance systems. Each world contributes what they're best at, and everyone benefits from the diversity." "And if the hegemony refuses?" the High Chancellor asked coldly. Rodriguez smiled. "Then you can explain to your 8,000 worlds why you're fighting a war on 17 fronts against enemies using Earth-inspired tactics. Oh, and did we mention, we've been teaching other species how to make computer viruses. The crystallines are particularly good at it. They think in fractals, which apparently makes for really nasty malware." As if on cue, several hegemony data pads in the room began displaying advertisements for something called extended warranty coverage. Dr. Chen pulled up his own presentation, this one thankfully more professional in appearance. "We've run the projections. If the hegemony continues its current expansion model, you'll face complete collapse within 50 years. Too many resources spent on control, not enough on innovation. But if you transition to an alliance model, everyone benefits, including you." He showed economic models, resource distribution patterns, and technological advancement projections. The math was solid, even if the slides did include a suspicious number of references to science fiction movies. "You're asking us to abandon 10,000 years of tradition," Vex said slowly. "We are asking you to evolve," Rodriguez countered. "That's what humans do. We adapt, we change, we survive. And now we're offering to teach the rest of the galaxy how to do the same." The room fell silent except for the faint sound of cat videos playing in the background. Then something unprecedented happened. One of Vex's junior officers, a young hegemony citizen who had been quietly observing, spoke up without permission. "I want to learn," she said simply. "They're chaos." "It's beautiful. They turned warfare into art, resistance into community, conflict into growth. The Empire offers order, but Earth offers life." The breakdown of hegemony discipline in that moment signaled more than any battle could have. Their own people were choosing curiosity over control. The High Chancellor's image flickered as he conferred with the hegemony high command. The wait stretched for nearly an hour, during which the humans ordered pizza, and somehow convinced half the hegemony delegation to try it. Vex found himself holding a slice of something called pepperoni and questioning everything he thought he knew about primitive species. Finally, the High Chancellor spoke. "The hegemony will consider a transitional arrangement, a trial period of coexistence." "Great," Rodriguez said cheerfully. "We'll send you our draft agreement. Fair warning, it's written in Comic Sans," Marcus insisted, "and honestly, he's earned it." As the formal negotiations continued, something remarkable was happening throughout the galaxy. The rebellion wasn't ending. It was transforming. Worlds weren't fighting against the hegemony anymore. They were fighting for something better. Earth had given them more than tactics. It had given them vision. On Pentara, farmers were converting their agricultural equipment into art installations that doubled as communication arrays. On Hydros, the aquatic species were teaching Earth's dolphins their language, creating the galaxy's first interspecies translation without technology. On Crystalline, beings of living stone were learning to laugh, discovering that humor could resonate through silicon as easily as through carbon. Within 6 months, the Galactic Community Alliance had 847 member worlds, with more joining daily. The hegemony still existed, but increasingly as just one voice among many rather than the sole authority. Earth had become the de facto cultural capital of the galaxy, not through conquest but through the simple act of being incredibly, chaotically, beautifully human. Marcus Williams, now 13 and somehow holding the title of Galactic Youth Ambassador, hosted a celebration broadcast from Earth. Behind him, humans and aliens of every description mingled in what had once been the UN Assembly Hall, now expanded to accommodate beings of all sizes and environmental needs. So like, "We did it," Marcus said to the camera, his suit still too big but now decorated with pins from dozens of worlds. "We went from almost getting conquered to basically inventing galactic democracy in like 6 months. Not bad for a bunch of chaotic monkeys, right?" He held up his juice box in a toast. "To Earth for being too weird to conquer. To the hegemony for learning to chill. And to everyone else, welcome to the chaos. Trust me, you're gonna love it here." As the broadcast ended, Commander Vex stood on the observation deck of what was now called the Alliance Defense Fleet's flagship. His uniform bore new insignia, not of the hegemony, but of the collaborative force that protected all member worlds. Rodriguez stood beside him, looking out at the stars. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "The end of your empire?" Vex considered the question. "We conquered 8,000 worlds and learned nothing. Earth taught us more in 6 months than we learned in 10 millennia. So no, Secretary General, I don't regret the end. I'm curious about the beginning." Rodriguez smiled. "That's very human of you, Commander." "Perhaps," Vex replied, surprising himself with what might have been humor. "That's not such a bad thing. Below them, Earth spun on, blue and green and chaotic as ever. Once it had been targeted for conquest. Now it was the heart of something unprecedented. A galactic community built not on fear or control, but on cooperation, creativity, and the undeniable power of controlled chaos. The galaxy's worst nightmare had become its greatest hope. And somewhere in Detroit, Marcus Williams was already working on his next project, figuring out how to make hegemony food. Synthesizers produce better pizza. The future had never looked more deliciously uncertain. The Galactic Renaissance 2 years after Earth's first contact with the hegemony. The galaxy had transformed beyond recognition. What historians would later call the Terran catalyst had sparked changes that rippled through every corner of civilized space. The rigid order that had defined galactic civilization for millennia had given way to something far more dynamic and unpredictable. The transformation wasn't without its challenges. On the former hegemony capital world of Axiom Prime, the governing council struggled to adapt to their new reality. For the first time in their species' history, they had to actually convince other worlds to follow their proposals, rather than simply decreeing them. The learning curve was steep and often humbling. Admiral Thex, formerly Supreme Commander of Hegemony Forces, now served as head of the Alliance Defense Coalition. She stood in her office, which had been redesigned by a collaborative team of human and alien architects. Gone were the austere metal walls and harsh lighting. In their place were living walls covered in bioluminescent plants from 12 different worlds. Soft adaptive lighting that changed based on the stress levels of occupants, and what humans had insisted on calling a chill zone, complete with beanbag chairs that could accommodate 20 different body types. Her morning briefing was unlike anything from her hegemony days. Instead of subordinates delivering reports in order of rank, she participated in what humans called a stand-up meeting, where everyone, regardless of position, shared updates while actually standing. It was chaos, but surprisingly effective chaos. "Morning, Admiral," greeted Chen Yuki, the former teenager from Tokyo who had discovered the hegemony targeting patterns. Now 19 and serving as Earth's youngest tactical advisor, she brought a perspective that formal military training could never provide. "So we've got 3 new worlds applying for Alliance membership, 2 trade disputes that need mediation, and someone taught the crystallons about practical jokes. They turned an entire moon into what looks like giant googly eyes. The locals are not amused." Thex found herself doing something that would have been unthinkable in her hegemony days. She laughed. The sound still surprised her sometimes, this expression of amusement that humans had somehow made contagious across species barriers. "How do we mediate the trade disputes?" she asked. "Pizza Summit," Yuki suggested immediately. It worked for the Pentara Hydros fishing rights conflict. Something about sharing food makes everyone more reasonable. Plus, the Zephyrians just invented a new type of cheese that supposedly tastes like starlight. "I'm dying to try it." The Admiral approved the suggestion without hesitation. 2 years ago, she would have spent weeks analyzing diplomatic protocols. Now she knew that sometimes the best solution was the simplest one, especially if it involved food. Meanwhile, on Earth, the planet had become the galaxy's most unlikely university. The Global Learning Exchange hosted millions of alien students, all eager to understand the human approach to existence. The campus, hastily constructed across multiple continents, was a marvel of controlled chaos. Buildings designed by different species stood side by side, connected by walkways that accommodated everything from tentacles to crystalline forms. Professor Dorothy Chen, the grandmother whose kitchen appliance resistance technique had changed the course of the war, now taught a course called Advanced Improvisation and Creative Problem Solving. Her students included former hegemony commanders, young rebels from liberated worlds, and even a few energy beings who manifested as controlled lightning in specially designed containment suits. "Today," she announced to her packed lecture hall, adjusting her glasses that had been modified to translate 17 different visual spectrums, "we're going to learn about the power of good enough. Perfection is the enemy of progress. Sometimes you just need something that works right now, even if it's held together with tape and hope." She held up an artifact from the war, one of the original modified microwave ovens that had created Earth's defensive shield. It was ugly, inefficient, and had what appeared to be a coat hanger jammed into its circuitry. It had also saved the planet. "The hegemony spent 300 years perfecting their orbital bombardment technology," she continued. "We defeated it in 3 hours with appliances I bought on sale in 1987. The lesson? Never underestimate the power of making do with what you have." Her students, despite coming from radically different backgrounds, all nodded in understanding. The concept of creative improvisation had spread through the galaxy like a beneficial virus, infecting every aspect of life with possibility. The economic transformation was equally dramatic. The old hegemony model of centralized resource distribution had given way to what economists called chaotic. Capitalism with socialist characteristics and a dash of gift. Economy. Nobody fully understood how it worked, but trade was booming. The Pentarans traded agricultural products for crystalline art. Earth exchanged entertainment for advanced technology. The aquatic hydros had somehow become the galaxy's primary producers of what they called mood music, which other species found inexplicably soothing. Marcus Williams, now 15 and having hit his growth spurt, served as head of the Galactic Youth Council, a position he had essentially invented and then convinced everyone needed to exist. His office on the rebuilt space station was exactly what you'd expect from a teenager given unlimited resources: part command center, part gaming lounge, part science lab, and inexplicably, part kitchen. The thing about young people, Marcus explained to a documentary crew filming for the Galactic Network, is that we don't know what's impossible yet. Adults see problems. We see puzzles. Adults see different species. We see potential friends who might have cool toys to share. Behind him, a young hegemony citizen was teaching a crystalline how to play video games, while a teenage Hydras worked with human engineers to design what they called a party submarine for purely recreational purposes. The scene was absurd, heartwarming, and somehow perfectly representative of the new galactic order. The cultural exchange went both ways. Humans had eagerly absorbed alien innovations, though not always in ways their creators intended. Hegemony meditation techniques designed for absolute mental discipline had been adapted into what humans called power napping, crystalline. Mathematical harmonies meant for complex calculations were being used to create entirely new genres of music. The Hydro's bioluminescent communication system had been incorporated into what Earth's clubs called the ultimate rave experience. Not everything was smooth sailing. The Free Worlds movement, comprised of species that wanted complete independence from any galactic structure, caused regular diplomatic headaches. Several former hegemony hardliners had formed what they called the Order, Restoration Front, though their membership dwindled every time Earth broadcast another cooking show or comedy special that made their recruits laugh. The real challenge came from what philosophers called the meaning crisis. For thousands of years, species had defined themselves in relation to the hegemony, either as members, subjects, or rebels. Now, with that structure gone, entire civilizations were asking fundamental questions about their purpose and place in the universe. Earth's answer was characteristically straightforward. Why not try everything and see what sticks? This philosophy led to the Great Experiment, a galaxy-wide initiative where worlds could try different governmental, economic, and social systems with full alliance support. Some worlds embraced democracy, others tried various forms of socialism, and a few invented entirely new systems that defied classification. The Crystallans created a government based entirely on musical harmonics. The Pentarans organized their society around growing seasons. 3 worlds tried to run their economies entirely through what humans had introduced as blockchain, though nobody, including humans, fully understood what that meant. Secretary General Rodriguez, now in her final year of service, stood before the Alliance Assembly for her farewell address. The hall had grown from its original design, now accommodating representatives from over 3,000 worlds. The architecture itself told the story of transformation. Hegemony metal merged with earthwood, crystalline resonance chambers next to Hydros water features, energy being containment fields adjacent to traditional seating. 2 years ago, she began, her voice carrying the weight of history. Commander Vex arrived at Earth expecting to find another primitive world, ready for subjugation. Instead, we found each other. We found that our differences weren't weaknesses to be eliminated, but strengths to be celebrated. She paused, looking out at the assembled representatives. The old galactic order promised peace through control. We offer something different: growth through chaos, strength through diversity, and progress through the simple act of being genuinely curious about each other. The assembly erupted in various species-appropriate expressions of approval, applause, harmonic resonance, bioluminescent flashing, and what the gas-based beings did that roughly translated to enthusiastic vibrating. In the aftermath of the assembly, as representatives mingled in ways that would have been unthinkable under the hegemony. Commander Vex found himself in conversation with Marcus Williams. The teenager was excitedly explaining his latest project, a collaborative effort to explore beyond the galaxy using technology that combined every species' unique advantages. See, the hegemony always explored to conquer, Marcus explained, his hands moving animatedly. But what if we explored just to see what's out there? What if we went looking for friends instead of subjects? Vex nodded slowly. 2 years ago I would have called that naive and dangerous. And now? Marcus asked with a grin. Now, Vex admitted, I want to be on the first ship. As the celebrations continued into the night, Earth's gift to the galaxy became clear. It wasn't their technology, though that had been impressive. It wasn't their military tactics, though those had been effective. It was their fundamental belief that existence didn't have to be a zero-sum game, that there was room for everyone to thrive, and that sometimes the best solution to a problem was to throw a party and see what happened. The transformation was far from complete. There would be challenges, setbacks, and conflicts ahead, but for the first time in galactic history, species weren't facing those challenges alone. They were facing them together, with the kind of chaotic cooperation that only humanity could have inspired. Somewhere in the Detroit suburbs, Dorothy Chen sat in her kitchen, watching the galaxy-wide broadcast on a screen that had been a gift from the crystallines. She smiled as she saw her grandson Marcus shaking hands, tentacles, and energy fields with beings from 100 worlds. Not bad for a bunch of monkeys with microwave ovens, she murmured, raising her cup of tea in a quiet toast to the stars. The galaxy had learned the most important lesson humanity had to offer, that the future didn't have to be perfect to be wonderful. It just had to be possible, and with humans involved, everything was possible. The galactic renaissance had begun, and nobody knew where it would lead. That was the best part. If you want to see more of humanity's rise, smash that like button and subscribe. What do you think would happen if humans truly unlocked their full power? Let us know in the comments below.